IU fans, you've got your man as far as the next head football coach at Indiana. We heard some rumblings on Wednesday night. It became official on Thursday afternoon as athletic director Scott Dolson and the Indiana Hoosiers football program hired Curt Cignetti, formerly of James Madison University, as the school's next head football coach.
Well, he's still
We know
currently at James Madison,
that's
but
true. You're right. You're right. You're absolutely correct. The James Madison football coach, Curt Cignetti, will be the next head coach at Indiana. We're going to dive into our instant reactions, give you Cignetti's to-do list. What are the first few things he's got to take care of here as coach? Dive a little bit into 2024 expectations. The season is only 275 days away. We're going to dive into all of that and so much more here on episode 316 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Thursday, November 30th, 2023, where I'm your host, Nithin Christian. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, we'll get back to men's basketball next week. Today is a day to talk about the Indiana Hoosiers' big splash hiring as far as the next football coach is concerned. Curt Cignetti, 62 years old. He's been in all different levels of college football. He's had assistant coach positions. He's had head coach positions. The floor is yours. What are your immediate reactions to Indiana hiring Curt Cignetti to take over for Tom Allen?
all right. So we had a podcast a couple weeks ago. I think a couple weeks ago. It was like almost a week ago, right? Talking about
Yep.
it feels like a couple weeks ago,
Yeah, I know.
but
Things move quickly.
great. Today felt like 2 weeks. But no. So we had a podcast a week ago. We're talking about potential people to be looking at. Cignetti was one of those people that I thought was in a tier in which, like if Indiana go gets a Dan Mullen, Tulane's head coach, James Madison, like those guys that have head coaching experience and have been around the block a few times and know what they're doing and have shown an ability to win at lesser schools, I thought, oh, that would be a godsend, right? If Indiana can reach that level, like I don't expect them to, right? Like that's not, they bought out Tom Allen to move in a different direction, but those guys are going to be so sought after by every program in a much easier situation than in Indiana, right? There are like 7 jobs above the IU job right now. If you're pretending like this is the NCAA 14 coaching carousel, Indiana is the 7th down on the board. Signetti for sure could have walked in the door at Duke, and that job is way easier, even with the academic standards that are required to get to Duke. Way easier than the IU job. I think he could have gotten a good look at the Texas A&M job. I think he's a guy a caliber of something that like
Houston in the Big 12.
Houston in the Big 12 could have looked at, right? There's a lot of teams out there that are above Indiana as far as on the pay scale, on recruiting grounds, on Power 5 jobs that aren't just having to play Michigan, Ohio State, USC, every single
Mississippi
year.
State went
Mississippi
out and
State
got
went out and
Jeff
got
Lebby from Oklahoma,
exactly.
and that
No, so
conversation. We haven't discussed
but
Boise State, San Diego State, and
those
their
jobs are
situations.
better than Indiana. Those jobs they've proven you can go and win there and then get a bigger job, right? Indiana has been able to prove that you can come here, win, and get a better job than Indiana. Who on Indiana's coaching?
I believe Indiana's fired their last 6 or 7 head coaches. Kevin
Exactly.
Wilson was sort of different circumstances, but still, end of
But
the day,
even
that was the
even
result.
then, if you watched football during the Kevin Wilson era, you knew he wasn't going to move up to a better coaching job. That he was peaking at Indiana. Like there was no way he was going to be able to get a
Well, and
better
now
coaching job somewhere else.
he's at Tulsa, so
Yeah.
you're right.
I know. So, anyways, I was wonderfully surprised by the news, right? That Indiana went and got him. I saw a lot of the rumors on Twitter, of course, along probably with everybody else in this podcast last night about it possibly happening. And Nithin was like, maybe we should hold off on doing a podcast till tomorrow, just in case the news breaks. But
tea leaves, we're there.
Tea leaves were floating down the river, and the white smoke was going up, and Indiana just went and made one of, if not the best fit hires of the entire offseason. You have gotten a guy that has won everywhere, including the other Indiana University that's down the road from me in Pennsylvania, to Elon, to James Madison at the FCS level, and now 11-1 at the FBS level. Including beating a couple Power 5 teams this year, or at least Virginia.
At least Virginia. I think that's it, but I'll double check.
You know, I am so excited about this hire. Like, I saw a couple people in the comment section of the IU tweet.
Right.
It was like, can't wait to renew my season tickets. I was like, this is what Indiana football needed, right? Like, I've seen people on Twitter. I saw Pat McAfee talked about it on a show today with old Colts head coach Chuck Pagano.
Yep.
And both of them obviously know the IU situation a little bit better than most because they both worked / played in the state for the Colts, right? And very close relationship with the college football programs in the state. They both agreed that this was not only a tremendous hire for IU, but that IU is a very hard job and that no one cares about IU football. And you know what? We're sitting here doing a podcast on a Thursday night. I can tell you, people do care about IU football.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I agree.
The problem with IU football is that we all know it's going to hurt us.
And right? At the end of the day, when you go from 0 to 2 to 1 Big Ten wins each year, you're going to have apathy.
That's what I'm saying.
The same thing happened in men's basketball when they missed the tournament.
Exactly. But there will always be men's basketball diehards because there is a
history of success.
There is no history of success in Indiana. There's, in fact, a history of
zero.
There's the exact opposite. There's a history of complete and utter apathy, right, at Indiana. So it's the opposite. With basketball, it's understood that the fans are going to show out. Even, like, again, when Tom Brady first
in dark
took
days,
over,
I was an undergrad.
In dark days, the fans still showed up in numbers to support the team, even though they knew they were going to get the doors bashed in by 20. Right.
Destroyed,
right, but they're still going to show up because that's what you do for the team, and you believe in them. There is no belief in the Indiana football program. This is a guy that can bring back belief in the Indiana football program, if not bring back belief. Sorry, because there was never any belief to begin with.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you can maybe argue 2020, but as we saw within a span of 3 years, all of that was erased and reversed to a point where Tom Allen was relieved of his duties the morning after Indiana lost to Purdue in the bucket game, a game where you went back and said, man, there were about 10 points in that game where a good head coach could have helped Indiana win it instead of stumble and stub their toe at the end. I completely agree with your point as far as IU fans really buying into this program when things go well. We've seen it in social media when there's a highlight reel touchdown catch by Donovan McCulley. People are flocking, liking, retweeting, sharing, exhibiting interest and excitement. They just need to see it sustained.
The Colts, Nithin, are some of the best fans in the NFL. They are.
I mean,
Notre Dame is down the road. Purdue,
and I've been in person. I was at the Cincinnati home game when Indiana fans showed out, and it was a great game to the finish. Even with the ridiculous targeting ejection for Micah McFadden. I will say that a lot of folks have sat here and said, can Curt Cignetti replicate that 2019-2020 success of Tom Allen? Some folks even joke that Curt Cignetti might be a little bit of a Tom Crean type impact for Indiana football. They almost share some physically similar characteristics.
Do look like
A
each
little,
other.
just
It's
a little.
It's a
Just a little.
tiny bit.
The figure at IU that I look to as a role model for Curt Cignetti here is actually someone who's coaching as we speak in a game, and that's Terry Morin, the Indiana women's program, because that's an example of someone who is able to set a standard, set an example for others to follow at the Indiana women's basketball program. That was also a situation where a team had no success. But if you went to the games before Morin was hired, and if you saw the kind of reaction IU fans had, when there were big plays, when there were big moments, Indiana fans would let their voice be heard, but you just knew that they weren't going to make the tournament. They were going to lose more games than they won. And then Terry Morin came along.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw NCAA tournaments, and you saw wins over top 25 teams, and you saw players get selected into the WNBA. And just like that, you're getting 5-digit crowds at Indiana women's basketball games. And there's some of
Rightfully
our,
so.
tweets and posts related to the women's basketball team generate more reaction than really any other sport, frankly, outside of Khalil Ware putting up big numbers for the men's basketball team. So when it's all said and done, if Curt Cignetti wants to talk to someone and figure out, hey, who can I follow as far as footsteps in Indiana is concerned, his first phone call really should be to Terry Morin to figure out how to set an example in a football program, in an athletics program at Indiana. I'm really looking forward to hearing Cignetti and Scott Dolson speak to the media. That's going to take place at 2:30 Eastern time on Friday afternoon. We'll be there for Indiana HQ. We're your one-stop shop for IU sports. We cover these teams at Indiana University, and we give you all the information you need to know. We're not going to run through Curt Cignetti's bio here. That's something you can search. But for me, Matt, this hire hits the sweet spot as far as Indiana football is concerned, because not everyone can do this job. And by the way, I'm including Kirby Smart and Nick Saban and Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh in this conversation. Maybe not Harbaugh, because Harbaugh won at Stanford. I'm going to include the first three. I don't think Kirby Smart and Nick Saban and Ryan Day could run a successful football program.
I don't think Ryan
Indiana
Day can
University.
run a successful football program anywhere other than Ohio State. But let's not even talk about that.
And so the funny thing is, as far as Curt Cignetti is concerned, I see someone who's traversed the United States to experience college football in a number of different locales. He's coached East Coast. He's coached Midwest. He's coached in the South. He's coached as an assistant. He's coached as a head coach. He's been at Division II. He's been at Group of Five. He's been an assistant for Nick Saban. He's seen a lot. And that's the type of head coach that you need to hire at Indiana. And maybe if it wasn't Cignetti, it would have been someone else. But I think it would have been very difficult, for example, for people like Mike Hart or for the Ohio State Justin Fry. I think it would have been very difficult for both of those guys to be the head coach at Indiana University, because it's such a different weight class. Yep. The way you win at Indiana is different than the way you win at Michigan or Ohio State or USC. Now, one thing that you have required for success at Indiana is a creative offense. Great news. Curt Cignetti's background is on the offensive side of the football. As a quarterback's coach, as a run game coordinator, as a tight ends coach. If you haven't heard yet, Cignetti was very responsible for the development of Julio Jones at Alabama. That's pretty significant. In addition to some of the other receivers he's developed. In fact, just recently at James Madison, he had Antoine Wells in the FCS level. Wells transferred to South Carolina, was very good for the Gamecocks last year. He had a tough season this 23 season, but he's going to be in the NFL. So it's an offensive system that's been applied to receivers over the last 10 years, 15 years, and he's seen success. So all in all, if I had to grade this hire, 10 out of 10 is where I'm at with this. And you could say, yeah, you could have had this guy, you could have had that guy, you could have done this, you could have done that. But when it's all said and done, I'm not expecting Curt Cignetti to come to Indiana and win 10 games a year. That would be absurd. But as far as establishing a consistent, competitive program that can score points, I am absolutely floored that Indiana was able to snag Curt Cignetti as their next head coach as far as the Indiana football program. I will be honest, I typically feel like I get kind of cynical as far as IU football is concerned. This isn't the place for that today. And even if Indiana goes 4-8 next year, I'm still going to look back on this hiring, considering where else Cignetti could have gone, what else could have happened. I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. But Matt,
this is very
the work is just beginning.
Yeah.
Let me know if you disagree with 10 out of 10, and then let me know and let the fans know who are listening here. What are the first couple things Cignetti needs to do here in order to get this thing up and running? Because life comes at you fast in college football.
All right. So first off, I think it's at least a 9 out of 10, again, for fit. And given what he's done at James Madison and his previous stops, and you add on the fact that he might be one of the better talent evaluators out there, legitimately.
Seriously.
What he did at Alabama helped setting up Nick Saban's program. Because remember, he was among the first batch of assistants at Alabama. Back when, look, not that Nick Saban was starting.
Google Alabama versus Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah, exactly.
2007 or
2007. That's the moment in which they ended up getting Nick Saban. No, I mean, he helped set up the Alabama program from the ground up. Like, again, that Alabama was basically where Michigan State is now, I would say, like around the same level at the time. Obviously with more historical success, but again, they were sitting around 6-6, or like maybe Texas A&M is a little bit more applicable than that. But like, you know, a mid-table SEC team, when they're Alabama, they should be good. And then Nick Saban shows up, brings Cignetti in as part of that first crew, and they end up. I don't think he ended up. Was he a part of a national championship at Alabama?
Yes,
I think he was. He was. Yeah, he was. He was a part of one of their first national championship under the
09 against Texas.
Yep. And then he ended up leaving. I mean, just he's a brilliant football mind. I saw something on Twitter today. That's the funniest thing ever. He has his wife and his kids call him coach.
Wow.
I mean, I don't look. Whew. If I didn't know there was Tom Crean similarities beforehand, that screams Tom Crean to me.
Ooh.
Tom Crean is just as much a basketball guy as this guy is a football guy, and I appreciate that. I love that. I love that about him. Anyways, what he needs to do first, is this: figure out a quarterback, because everything starts falling into place after that. Look, have all the quarterbacks on the roster transferred. I think Taven's still here.
Yep. He is still on the roster.
Taven is still technically on the roster, has not put his name in the portal. Sorsby has. Dexter Williams has. If you want to count Donovan McCulley as a quarterback, he has, right? So, again, all of these guys have decided to transfer from the program, or at least seek opportunities away from Indiana. You got to go grab a couple of these guys back. I'm not saying you go get everybody, because, look, sometimes a new face, some fresh blood into the quarterback room. When Taven was here for a year, Sorsby's been here for 2 years, Dexter Williams has been here for what, 2-3 years?
No, even more. Because Williams, I believe Williams on the roster even going back to 2019. I'll double check that, but he was at least on the 2020 team.
Yeah,
so this would be his 5th year coming up.
Jesus, I'm so old. I feel like I remember him being a freshman. Anyways, Dexter Williams has been in the room for a while. Getting a fresh face into that spot would be awesome. And if you're looking around in the transfer portal, there are a lot of big names. Not saying that Indiana go get a Cam Ward, but that would be insane. But, you see DJ Vongalele in there. Yep. There's a Dante Moore, who's a former Big Ten recruit, 5-star that's in there. And that's just the big names. There's some other smaller guys that are also just as good. I mean, Duke's quarterback is in there, right?
Yeah.
So, though, I would be very surprised if he didn't.
And of course, as we saw with Dion's hiring in Colorado, what if Curt Cignetti brings over his quarterback from James Madison?
Who again? They just got the news today. We'll see which James Madison players end up putting their name in the portal, anyways.
That roster's got a ton of great players on it, including QB1.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a good team. It's a good team, and I don't know what the rules are as far as what Cignetti wants to do with his former team. Right? He might say, "Hey, if you want to follow me to the Power 5 level, you can follow me to Indiana if you would like to." There's also very much the chance that he goes, "No, I want James Madison to be good." In fact, if they end up promoting from, let's say James Madison ends up promoting from within and one of his assistants, right? He might want to help keep that team together so that one of his assistants gets a little bit fairer of a shot at James Madison to continue the success that he had in this past year. So it's a very fluid situation at James Madison, and the fact that he's even coaching the bowl game is pretty sweet. Or he's
and I love that.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's awesome, right? So again, I'm excited. Again, he's got to figure out a quarterback, and then I think everything else will fall back into place. And then step 2 obviously would be, once you find out a QB, get some of the guys back, see what pieces you kind of have,
exactly
what you got in the cupboard there, and then hit the transfer portal hard. Because that's where he made his bread and butter at JMU. A lot of his really good players were transfers,
including the quarterback McLeod, who had been at South Florida, Arizona. Then he headed over to James Madison for the 23 season and absolutely lit the Sun Belt on fire. And I would go so far as to say, if Jordan McLeod came to Indiana, I think he'd be a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten for 2024. If it's Brendan Sorsby, I think maybe I'm saying the same thing.
I might be saying, honestly, I was not convinced.
And by the way, that's in a conference where you're adding 4 teams that all had 3 of them had elite quarterback play this past season in Oregon, Washington, and USC, and then UCLA is a wild card as far as what they do.
But here's the thing, Nathan. Like I look at next year's schedule, right? Like looking ahead, if you can go get a top, because last year Indiana got the 15th best transfer class in the country.
Yeah, it was at least a top 25, if nothing else. Yeah.
I believe on 24/7 it was 15, because I remember being like, holy smoke. Like, what? But I mean, again, they were filling a lot of holes, a lot of guys
Andre Carter, EJ Williams,
Lewis they got a lot of good transfers. If Indiana can replicate that, or even do one better, looking at next year's schedule, it's a lot fairer for Indiana football. Like, again,
home Florida International, home Western Illinois. You're already saying 2-0. If it's not 2-0, we're gonna have a problem. And then you talk about a road trip to UCLA, Big Ten opener, Rose Bowl. Have fun, Coach Cignetti. Home Charlotte, home Maryland. I mean,
at Northwestern.
Maryland's going to have a new quarterback next year. But of course, there's a lot of knowledge shared between both teams, being in the Big Ten East until this 24 season. At Northwestern, I mean, Wildcats had a great year. They did. But can certainly see a situation where Indiana's favored in that game if things go well. Then you got a bye week. Home games against Nebraska and Washington. Obviously, a lot of emotions will be part of that Washington-Indiana game at Memorial Stadium. Invite Michael Penix back. You hope he's on his bye week in the NFL when you have him in the building. Never mind Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, William Inge, etc. At Michigan State, home Michigan. At Ohio State, home Purdue. Wrap it up. 12 games. Fun in the sun.
There's 12 games. 9 of those I think are winnable. The Washington game to me is depending on it's because it's at home. I think it could be you could put that in the toss-up category. I would say, like, as far as wins go, look, I love getting Louisville off the schedule. Thank you. That
Great
was
move.
very smart. It
Coach
was
Allen,
brilliant.
right?
It was
We're gonna tip our
brilliant.
hat to Coach Allen, or is that more
Tip
of
our
you think
catch,
a
tipping our
Dolson move?
both. Whoever made that decision, thank you. Because
Shout out.
again, they're going to be a top 10 team next year.
Yeah.
Going into next year.
No reason.
Going into next year, they're going to be a top 10, top 15 team.
And they
There's
got a
no
weak
reason.
ACC.
Yeah, there's no reason we need to play Louisville again. Just no. FIU, Western, Charlotte.
Fat 3-0.
3 dubs, right? UCLA is, I mean, they've just lost their 5-star freshman QB. Dante Moore, the transfer portal. I would not be surprised if there isn't more people putting name. I mean, Chip Kelly is a he's a sinking ship. Okay, UCLA fans are, you talk about apathy, fan apathy. UCLA fans have reached Indiana levels of apathy about the Bruins.
Long gone are the days of Josh Rosen and Greg Dulcich.
There's a coach at UConn that I think could do really well out in
I see what you're saying.
in LA. Jim Moore is his name. I think he could do something good.
I hear you.
No, Maryland. Look, Tulia's not there, and it's at home, so that should be very winnable. Northwestern's new coach as well. Mm-hmm. Nebraska at home. Nebraska's just Nebraska football. That's going to be a 1-score game either way. Washington's going to have a new QB, right? Sure. And they're losing most, if not all, of their receivers to the NFL this year. Again, that's a very old receiving core.
Yep.
And again, Michigan State also new coach. So I mean, that's one. I could see Michigan State 6, 7.
I could see Michigan State and Indiana follow the same trajectory next year. Honestly.
Yeah, there are 9 games in a row that Indiana have a chance to win in. Then it's followed by 2 games they have no chance.
The greatest hits, right? You got to have Michigan and Ohio State on the schedule.
Not happening. And then again, Purdue, who is just as bad as Indiana was this year, if not only a little bit better.
Yeah,
because they won head-to-head
in a close game at home.
Now, Indiana has all the momentum going into this Purdue game at home.
Well,
should be a win because
is it fair to expect bowl game in year 1, or is that too aggressive?
I think given the schedule, I think the minimum expectation should be 5-7.
Okay.
I will give him a pass if he doesn't make the bowl game year 1, because again, you still have a lot of Tom Allen's guys. Right. Let's say Indiana isn't.
But I'm going to say one thing, Matt. Like, I love Tom Allen's guys. Like, I really did. Like, and
it's not a dig at his guys at all. I'm just saying he doesn't have the talent that he's picked out to fit the position that he needs.
And totally fair. But it was kind of funny to me that Tom Allen, I kind of think, chose violence Sunday afternoon in a statement that he released after he got fired, saying that Indiana had to do a better job supporting the program financially, NIL. And look, I believe in that. Okay. Yeah. NIL, everyone go donate if you haven't already.
I gave $20 today.
You got to pay. You got to pay to play in college football. That, I don't know if that was the intent, but that's just the way it is now. But I got a lot of whiffs from Tom Allen related to his players. Like I feel like the way I read it was him kind of throwing his players under the bus, which he did a few times at the end of the season here, saying the defense against Illinois let us down, and the quarterback with Taven Jackson let us down. And there were times where Tom Allen, who, was notorious for having his players back, at the end of the 23 season, kind of threw his players under the bus, up to and including that statement that he released on Sunday. Maybe I'm reading into it wrong, but I felt with Tom Allen saying, hey, NIL wasn't good enough. It didn't allow us to field a roster good enough to win. I disagree, sir.
I disagree. They could have won this year.
I disagree. I'm sorry, but when I see Kansas winning, and when I see Arizona winning, and I see Northwestern winning, and by the way, it was Akron who came into your house and almost won. That's not an NIL problem. That's not a roster problem. That's a you problem.
The roster, I will stand by it. The roster this year was good enough.
And you were horrible at picking assistants.
With this schedule, Nithin, with this schedule, it was good enough to go 6-6.
I agree. And I see Brendan Sorsby. I'm like, that dude's good. Trent Howland.
Good.
I hope he comes back. I think Trent Howland could have a Jordan Howard-like career arc throughout Indiana into the NFL. The receivers, my God. If the offense knew what they were doing before week 7, you may have had something.
The Ohio State game was winnable. The Louisville game was winnable.
It was a bunch of blind leading the blind.
Yeah, exactly.
And once you actually established an identity after the bye week, things looked respectable. And I look at Donovan McCulley, and I look at Jalen Lucas, and I see E.J. Williams. The punter, James Evans, had a magnificent season for Indiana. And I'm not even getting into the defense that had a number of young, promising players across
We wasted a year of Andre Carter.
Andre Carter was fantastic. I think the defensive line is showing some growth with guys like Nick James. I thought Jordan Shaw stepped in at corner and had some really nice reps. And that doesn't include the really impressive play we got from experienced guys like Aaron Casey, Jacob Mangum-Farrar, and Nick Toomer and things like I thought Indiana's players were plenty worthy enough of making a bowl game this year in the brutal Big Ten East. Okay? So if Coach Cignetti can bring back Tom Allen's guys, and I would say just as importantly, if not more importantly, bring in better assistants than Tom Allen brought in, with a couple exceptions, I think Indiana's really cooking with something here where they can follow the template of Kansas, of Northwestern, of Arizona, of Duke, teams that are consistently winning 6, 7, 8 games. I love the players that Indiana have on their roster. I know a lot of guys put their name in the portal, and they should have, including some of the offensive linemen like Carter Smith and Josh Sales. And I hope that Coach Cignetti can bring them back in, because I really feel like many of those guys can be foundational pieces. And it kind of fired me up, as you can tell, when I saw Tom Allen call out NIL. And again, I'm pro NIL, push NIL. It's important. But I got whiffs of him calling out his players, which he did multiple times at the end of the year. And I look at this team, and I think there's plenty to win with as far as this roster is concerned. And now you say, hey, Coach Sigs, like you said, Matt, bring in players that fit your system, whether it's from James Madison or whether it's players who are available. And now you really have something going. It was crazy, Matt. James Madison, this is a program that was ranked for 6 consecutive weeks in the AP Top 25. Yep. They reached as high as number 18 in the country. Crazy stuff as far as their transition from the FCS to the FBS that has prohibited them from playing in their conference championship game. But if Indiana faced James Madison in a football game using 2023 data, James Madison would probably be about a 5-6 point favorite if that game was in Memorial Stadium. Yep. So that just goes to show you the growth and the progress that Coach Cignetti's made. When you look at Cignetti's resume, Matt, and when you look at the different aspects of his career, what do you think is the biggest strength he's going to bring to the table at IU? And what do you think is maybe your biggest area of concern right now as far as Coach Cignetti, who is the newest head football coach at IU?
Okay, so biggest strength would be talent acquisition and talent identification. The guy knows when he has a good football player or when he's watching one. I mean, whether it's back as Alabama days to his Indiana University, Pennsylvania days to, all of these places, people have identified the fact that he's taken players that people didn't think were really all that good and made them great. Or he's taken great players, identified that they're great, and gotten them like he did at Alabama, right? So that's number one. And then number two is that he builds programs. So that's, again, something he's going to do in Indiana. Now, the thing that does scare me a bit, but I think has to do with the fact that, again, he's been building programs instead of being at a good program, is that he probably had a team. He had one James Madison team, I believe, that I think was able to win an FCS championship.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe they stumbled in the final game. And if you go back and look at all of his seasons since he was a head coach, he always has one letdown game per season. There's always one game in that season that either A, they shouldn't have lost, or B, they should have had a fighting chance in, and they just didn't end up pulling through at the end. And you're going to have a lot of those opportunities at IU to get a game-changing, program-defining win. Like if it's a one-score game with a top-ranked Michigan team next year, right? That's a program-defining win if they can pull it off. If it's a one-score game at Michigan State next year, right, and you're 6-1, that is a program-defining game there, right? You can put yourself on the map here by pulling out some of these games. And in a lot of places, he's ended up doing that. Or like he did this year at James Madison, they play App State at home. They have college game day. Everybody's there. They've been on the poll for 6 straight weeks. It is their time to be on national television. And they kind of stubbed their toe and tripped over, they kind of tripped over themselves at the hurdle. They got a little bit too big for their britches, right? It ended up losing the game. That's what alarms me about Cignetti. But because it's Indiana and he's a program builder, these things are going to happen naturally. And I'm saying the same thing, and I'm giving him a pass on that because, again, you've taken a James Madison in 2 years from a FCS school who really good FCS schools can compete with FBS schools, but really good FCS schools have a hard time competing week in and week out with FBS schools. And he's taken FCS schools in James Madison and quickly transitioned them to an 11-1 FBS school, right? And they're going to Virginia and beating Virginia, right? So that part makes me just unbelievably excited about this hire. Unbelievably excited.
Makes total sense. I'll give you my answer here in just a moment as far as strength and weakness for Coach Cignetti. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And we're going to continue to give a shout out here to the Indiana men's soccer program who keep their NCAA tournament hopes alive, their title hopes still potentially possible after IU knocks off number 7 Virginia on the road in the Sweet 16. It was the Hoosiers who got the game-winning goal from Collins Oduro, freshman, to win 1-0 in Charlottesville. And now IU will face Notre Dame in the Elite Eight at 5 Eastern on Sunday. That's in South Bend. You guys can go. Not that far. It's a fun little trip. Notre Dame, the number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. The Hoosiers head coach, Todd Yeagley, recorded his 200th career victory in the win. IU had a fairly comfortable home game to start, but now back-to-back road wins over nationally seeded teams in order to advance to the Elite Eight in the NCAA men's soccer tournament. Wonderful to see there. I will absolutely be tuned in to watching the Hoosiers play their Elite Eight matchup against the Fighting Irish on Sunday. Folks, a reminder, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for The Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at The Hoosier Sound. This part's important. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. We have a full article up over on IndianaHQ.com discussing the hiring, our official story of Indiana's decision to add Curt Cignetti as their newest head football coach, 30th in program history. We give you a little bit more details about what he's accomplished to this point. It's funny, at James Madison, he was only an underdog 3 times over the last 3 years. Right? At Indiana, that's going to happen a lot, whether the team is good or not. In fact, in 2020, IU was an underdog 4 times, even though they had a great season. Yeah. That's the kind of thing that is different about Indiana than James Madison. But if you go back and you look at his time at Elon, that's a place where it's very, very difficult to win even at the FCS level. So you can definitely see a story here where Coach Cignetti is able to develop and put a product on the field, even if developers, even if you're coming from an underdog status. We've got a full article up over on IndianaHQ.com. Make sure you head over there if you have not already. For me, the biggest strength I'm seeing out of Coach Cignetti is just, I completely agree in your comment as far as developing players, but adjacent to that is just outperforming expectations. Mm-hmm. It's been forever since Indiana had a guy that did that outside of 2019 and 2020.
Yeah,
that's exactly what Indiana needs. You need a coach that knows how to step in and get players who perform better than they're supposed to. That's how you get the job done. I was so grateful to see in the Sun Belt this year, James Madison had an offense that put up a crap ton of points.
A lot of points, yeah.
I mean,
they scored for fun.
It was, it's there were a couple of 16s and 20s and 23s in there. Really everything else 38, 41, 56 against good opponents. They went to Coastal Carolina, a good group of 5 football team. And the over-under in that game was 50. They scored 56. That's what you need. Jordan McLeod had an unbelievable season this year at James Madison. Last year, in Cignetti's Cignetti's 4th year at James Madison, they had Todd Centeio. And if you go back and look at 2022 quarterback stats, whether it's Pro Football Focus or your traditional numbers from ESPN or whatever the case is, Centeio rated very highly as it relates to production and performance for quarterbacks in college football. Now in 22, James Madison did go to Louisville and kind of got, beaten their doors off in a year where Scott Satterfield got fired. Not the most encouraging result, but with that said, I love the fact that Cignetti gets more than expected out of his players and knows how to build a successful offense across different levels of college football. That's exciting. If you go follow by Taylor L on Twitter, BYTAYLORL on Twitter, they put up a chart that essentially showed what's the talent level that your college football team has, and then what's the actual performance of that team. And consistently, during his time at James Madison, Cignetti brought in players that were of whatever talent, and then they vastly outperformed their talent level over the course of the last 5 years, where Cignetti was at James Madison. It's the opposite story for Tom Allen, and so if we're looking for signs to move forward, that's what I'm paying attention to. I'm very curious to see the assistance that Cignetti brings on here at Indiana. I don't need to tell you how critical that is.
Right.
I mean, Coach Allen messed it up the last 3 years as far as the assistants were concerned. Outside of bringing in Rod Carey as a fire drill option, outside of Brandon Shelby, who I really like, outside of Casey Teagarden, who I think is a very, very good special teams coach, and outside of Bob Bostad,
who did a wonderful job with the offensive
job with the offensive line. I am all aboard with Cignetti bringing any or all of those assistants back to Indiana if possible this year. So if it's Shelby, or if it's Teagarden, or if it's Bostad, or if it's Carey in some capacity, I am okay. Rod Carey did enough for me. I disagree with a lot that he did in specific spots, but I'm curious to see what happens there. I will not rage if Cignetti chooses to bring Rod Carey back on.
I would just be a little bit surprised.
Okay, that's fair. All I'm saying is, if Cignetti says, "Hey, Coach Carey, you actually deserve an off season to figure things out, rather getting thrust into the fire in week 7 or whatever," that's a thought process I'm okay with. That's just the way I see it. I understand it would be very underwhelming, but at the same time, that's how I would think. That's how I would think of it. Just as far as the weaknesses are concerned, I'm a little nervous about as it relates to Coach Cignetti. How does it look when you have to string together high major opponents back to back to back to back to back to back? I understand there are 3-week non-conference opponents. You can't slip up there. Obviously, it goes without saying. Shout out Archie Miller versus Indiana State. Sorry. All I'm saying is when you have to string those games together in a year where I'm not sure. I mean, I thought Northwestern was going to be awful this year. That didn't happen. Michigan State and Indiana brought up the rear in the conference. But now you're adding 4 teams that I don't think are going to be the worst in the league. You maybe can argue UCLA. I don't know. It's just there doesn't really seem like a bad team in the Big Ten next year. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe Nebraska. I don't know. Nebraska. I mean, Indiana doesn't play Minnesota. I don't know if you want to argue that, but I really look at this and go, there really isn't a bad team in this league. And as Matt and I pointed out, your Big Ten schedule goes Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State on the road, Michigan, Ohio State, pretty like it is relentless. And UCLA, right? Yeah, sandwiched around those 2 non-conference games early. Exactly. So it's one of those situations where I'm a little nervous, especially considering in 22, Cignetti's Dukes went to Louisville and lost by 3 touchdowns. And then in 23, they did win at Virginia, but it was close. So it was I think a 1-point final score margin, maybe 2 points there, in a year where Virginia had a bad season. So that's where I get a little bit nervous. Okay, how is Cignetti able to string together strong performances back to back to back to back? Any concerns as far as his recruiting here, Matt? Cignetti, okay, obviously was part of some Power 5 staffs early in his assistant career, early in the 2000s, in that time period before transitioning to Division II Group of 5 head coaching roles. Any concerns as far as the recruiting game, the NIL game here with Coach Cignetti as he takes over at IU?
I would say my questions about that for him don't actually reside with his ability to recruit or his ability to get guys to buy in on NIL. I'm not questioning that. What I'm questioning is the university's commitment to him, right? True. I'm hoping that what he's done in the process of taking the Indiana job is not just that he's believing in it, that he's gotten some actual serious promises from the university to help him out with things starting, right? So, for instance, getting a bigger NIL fund, number 1. Number 2, seriously going out and giving him a purse sizable enough for him to make a good, not even just good, great assistant staff, right? And then thirdly, that he has the trust in himself that he can be a Power 5 recruiter again, right?
Exactly.
He hasn't done it in about 10 years plus, almost going on 15, right? Since he was actually like a main recruiter, right? And I'm not saying he's going to end up being a main recruiter. That is why you hire a really good staff, so you can have guys on the staff that have more recent recruiting experience. But the recruiting game has, let's be honest, has a lot of things in this world have changed since 2009, right? And so while he was great in 2009, there's a lot of catching up to do that he hasn't had to do because he's been at the Division II, FCS, and now the Group of 5 level. Then he had a lot of crappy stuff he hasn't had to deal with that drives coaches insane, right? So that's why he's got to have a staff in place to help him with that. In the same way when we hired, I was talking about this before the podcast, but we hired Mike Woodson, right? At a very similar age, actually like almost eerily similar, right? Because you're looking at the Tom Allen or Tom Jesus. The Mike Woodson was 63 when we hired him. Cignetti is 62. Right?
Interesting.
It's very, very interesting. Both guys are at the same steps in life. Dolson hires. Both of them came in as very well. Mike Woodson wasn't as lauded as the Cignetti hire was. In fact, I think there was a lot more question marks around Mike Woodson hire than there was about the Cignetti one.
You're so right, Matt. Matt, we put the poll out on Twitter. 95% approval rating.
Yeah. No, I'm serious. And
I can dig it up, but I believe our thing for Woodson was like 60 to 70%.
Exactly. That's because some people were still sold on Brad Stevens, but that's neither here nor there. Cignetti, from a national media perspective, now some people are gonna hate this when I say this. I think he's getting more plaudits than when IU hired Archie Miller for their head coach, right? Like, everybody I have seen that's spoken on the Cignetti situation has been like, that's a great hire for IU, or in the most disrespectful / backhanded compliment way, he's too good for IU, right?
Yeah.
He could have gone to a better school than IU. The only thing I've seen that's been a negative from anybody has been, oh, he's 63 or 62, right? And to that I say, Indiana is not a job that you just get up and leave to go to another job. In fact, the last 6 coaches have shown you it is your last job at the Power 5 level. It is not a stepping stone. It would be amazing, by the way, if he makes it a stepping stone.
Sure. Yeah. Ohio State had, well, I guess outside of the Big Ten.
I mean, I would be a little bit
USC. Oh no, just kidding. That's Big Ten too. I can't think of a the freaking Florida
Clemson.
State. Yeah, Clemson. There we go. Clemson head coach.
R.I.P. Dabo. But no, like,
that was weird.
What I'm saying is this: he says he wants to coach another 13 years. He wants to coach till he's 75 and then he'll be done. If he somehow lasts 13 years in Indiana, that means some good things have happened, right? So the age thing, I couldn't care less about, right? And I said the same thing with Mike Woodson. Mike Woodson was here to get the program right and get a couple really good seasons together. And if we actually end up competing at a national level and competing for Final Fours or whatever during the Woodson tenure, that is, in my opinion, a bonus, right? That is an extra added on top of getting Indiana into the right spot.
Yep.
What this hire does is put somebody in place to get Indiana to the right spot, which is getting them perennially 6-6. In a bowl game and winning a bowl game every once in a while, right?
And it's where Kentucky is with Mark Stoops. It's where Duke is with Mike Elko. It's where
it's the same thing.
Arizona is with Jed Fish.
Kansas. I would say Kansas State job's very similar, even though they've had previous football success there. Duke, any of the big Northwestern, any of the big basketball schools and the nerd schools, Stanford and Duke, are all the same jobs. They're all the same. As long as you are doing the bare minimum that is allowed or required by the school to keep your job, you are going to keep your job. It's not rocket science, right? And so Cignetti has to just figure out how to get this team to 6-6 every year, and he will have a comfy job living in Bloomington in beautiful Southern Indiana, getting to eat at Nick's every weekend, having beers bought for him every time he goes to upstairs, right?
It's the Lance Leopold treatment from Kansas.
He will get the Lance Leopold treatment for just going 6-6 in Indiana. And I'm not even saying, like, there's a very good chance, by the way, that next year Indiana gets like 7 wins or 8 wins in the regular season next year. There isn't a legitimate shot at that. right? If you hit the transfer portal correctly and you get a lot of the really good guys back, and again, the NIL commitment is what I think it will be, right, from the university, given the fact that you paid $20 million to get
That's
rid of
going to
Tom
be
Allen.
part of it, but I think the coaching part of it will also play a big role.
I mean, yeah, we actually have
Like,
competent coaching.
Yeah, what is Nithin saying? The coach has to coach? What?
Yeah, I know. Amazing, right?
Make right decisions on fourth down, 2-point conversions. Get an offense out there that can score 35 points in a Big Ten game.
Or get an offense out there that can run more than just run plays after you get a
stop with the option. Put Jalen Lucas in positions where he can succeed. Don't reinvent.
Jalen Lucas out of the backfield in a JMU style offense is an absolute demon.
The backfield, Matt. I mean, fine, but slot, motion,
slot too,
out wide,
all
screens.
Over the place. Yes,
get him. He's a weapon. Indiana ignored him in the second half of the year. They had no clue how to deploy him correctly. Meanwhile, I'm watching Antoine Wells at the end of James Madison's time in the FCS go absolutely bonkers. 1,300 receiving yards, I believe, before moving on to South Carolina. I'm looking at Todd Centeio having an awesome season for James Madison in 2022. The Dukes continue to have a big 2023 as far as their offense is concerned. I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing that coaches got to do.
Yep.
Again, I know coaches got to coach. NIL will be critical. I'm not saying it's not. But coaches got to coach, whether it's improvement, whether it's understanding your identity from the first game of the season and not waiting until the 7th game of the season, having a clear idea of your depth chart, putting your best players in positions to succeed from the jump. I'm not asking for much. I don't think. Coaches got to coach. And so the assistants are going to matter. The recruiting here of Indiana's players before adding new individuals to the group, that's going to matter. What will Coach Sigs do as far as bringing over guys from James Madison? Going to be paying close attention to that. That's all going to be part of the puzzle here. So Matt and I are going to give you our final thoughts here in just a moment. But first, it's time for our social media shout out. At this point, we're going to be shouting out the channels where you can follow us across the different social media platforms. You can find us all over the place. We're at Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. On Instagram, Matt, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
You can find us
there. I didn't miss it this week.
It's all right. It's okay. Bounce back. Hey, look, that was Tom Allen era. This is the Curt Cignetti era. We'll be back up, ready to rock and roll. That's where you can find us. We're here for you until the end of time. So as far as I'm concerned, find us on social media. One-stop shop for IU sports, football, men's basketball, women's basketball, men's soccer, women's soccer, Olympic sports. Mark Cuban selling his stake in the Dallas Mavericks. We are all here for you at Indiana HQ. Mark Cuban, potential director of Indiana football operations. That's where you can find us on social media. Join us if you haven't already. Followers rapidly increasing. Head over to our pages if you haven't. Yeah. Matt, I mean, there's so much to discuss here, so much to think about. If you what's your burning question or two here as far as Indiana football is concerned, as far as Curt Cignetti is concerned? He's going to speak to the media tomorrow. If you had to underline one thing that's keeping you up at night now, the burning question as it relates to the IU football program, what is
it? What's the assistant pool going to look like?
Yeah, it's a great point.
If it's just Cignetti and he can't bring, let's say we don't have enough money to buy out his assistants and bring them over, or he wants higher level assistants, maybe some guys he helped coach with at Alabama back in 2009, maybe some guys that he worked with in JMU along the way that moved up the ranks, right?
Sure.
If we don't have the money to pay these guys, then what was the point of paying $20 million to get rid of Tom Allen?
15.5, Matt.
Sorry, 15.5. Either way, it's paying a significant chunk of money to get rid of the guy that you don't think is worthy of being the head coach at this school and this football program. What is the point of doing that if you're not going to then put up the money to help the next guy be successful?
Makes total sense. I couldn't agree more. For me, the burning question is, how is this going to look at a completely different level of college football? And I understand James Madison has had some great years recently, and I know Elon was a tough place to win, but it is different at the highest level of college football. You're talking about Big Ten play, where you're talking about adding 4 very, very high-level programs in UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington. Tom Allen had some really, really special times at Indiana, and he carried himself the right way. 2019 and 2020 will forever be a part of the IU football story. If Curt Cignetti can have 2 bowl-eligible seasons in his first 4 years, IU fans will throw a parade.
Yeah.
So, at this level of college football, things are different, especially when you're at Indiana. So yeah. I'm paying attention to that here. Over the course of the next 274 days before Indiana takes the field against Florida International in the season opener on August 31st.
Oh, I hate not having a bowl game.
It's just right around the corner. I guess y'all could travel to the Duke's bowl game. Does that count in Indiana's record? I think we gotta check. We gotta check the details there. If Cignetti wins the bowl game,
I don't think that counts.
I doubt it. Yeah, it's a fair point. But hey, I'll buy a shirt. Support the Dukes.
Hey, shout out the Dukes. I actually had a couple.
They were on my TV a lot this year, by the way.
They were on my TV a lot, and also I had a couple of their fans actually in my mentions.
Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Because I tweeted about them today. I had a bunch of them in my mentions today.
Yeah.
Basically being like, I'm so sad he's gone. You better take care of him.
Yeah.
Right? Like they actually genuinely love this guy. And I don't blame them again, like for what he did for their program. So
it's crazy times. I think that's pretty much where we're going to be. Let's wrap it up with some final thoughts, Matt. Anything in the world of college football that we haven't discussed yet related to the playoff or conference championship games? Anything on IU men's basketball? Anything else that I may have missed here as we wrap up on this Thursday night?
Men's basketball, Chloe Ware, I think, is a top 15 pick.
He's a baller.
But he's
Absolute
so good.
Killer.
He's a level of talent that honestly Indiana. I mean, we've had top 10, top 2,
sure,
top 1 picks, right? But I don't think.
Sorry, who's the one? I'm blanking.
We haven't had number 1 pick. We have number 2.
You got the 2. Yeah. Oladipo. Yeah,
Oladipo.
Okay. I was just thinking who's.
Not number 1.
Okay.
Eric, we had a number 1 recruit in Eric Gordon.
Yeah, we did.
True, but not a number 1 draft pick. That would be nice to get soon, by the way. I think Khalil Ware is at a level of talent that is actually able to put himself in a conversation for a number 1 pick. He won't be because he's older. He's got an extra year in college and whatever. But like his skill set, his size, his athleticism, his ability, it's all number 1 pick-ish worthy, right? He's a super freak. He's just not French. And 7'1" and doing this. If he was 7'1" and French and 18 years old and playing at Division II of Euro basketball,
wow,
he would be a top 5 pick. Okay.
Ooh, okay.
But because he's 19 and had a rough year at Oregon where he barely played,
true,
and is doing the same things this year, he'll be 15, and he'll be just as good somewhere else. There's your spicy take for today. But anyways, it's SIG season in football. So shout out to Coach Sig. I had to go buy a pack for this podcast today.
Wow. That I didn't see that coming. Anyway, so a great move by Scott Dolson. I don't know if I will eat these words in a year or in 5 years or whatever, but I love this hire. And I look at it with a critical eye, but I think if you're negative about this, man, I really don't get it. If you are though, and you're right, well, hey, that'll be par for the course as far as IU football is concerned. I think Indiana covers 2.5 against Maryland.
I hope so.
Tomorrow night. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Maryland is a little feisty, dangerous compared to I think what they've shown so far. They do like taking threes. They've missed a bunch.
It's the Jordan Geronimo Bowl.
So you see Assembly Hall. If one guy gets hot, Indiana's in trouble. Could be Jameer Young, could be Deshaun Harris-Smith, could be Kaiser, could be Batchelor. I guess we just don't know. As far as 3-point is concerned, Geronimo back should be fun. Looking forward to that game, and then of course IU's road trip to Ann Arbor. Indiana's got 2 winnable games. Men's basketball next 5-6 days or so. Should be fun to see that. Women's team down to Maine in the third quarter. Didn't see that happening. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 316th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at The Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation. We will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers. It's SIG season.